Imagine a world where the simple act of reading the Bible or understanding the laws of your own country was forbidden to most people. This wasn't just a distant ancient time. It was the early 16th century, a period that might seem close to us in history, but was worlds apart in terms of how people lived and thought. In this world, one man, Martin Luther, sparked a revolution that would change the course of history forever. His actions were so bold and so shocking that they not only reshaped the religious landscape of Europe, but also laid the groundwork for modern democracy and the freedom of thought we enjoy today. In the year 1520, Martin Luther was a relatively unknown monk and professor in a small German town called Wittenberg. But he was about to become one of the most controversial and influential figures of his time. Luther was fed up with the corruption and hypocrisy he saw in the Catholic Church. He believed that the Church had strayed far from the teachings of Jesus, and that it was using its power to exploit and control the people. So, in a bold move, he wrote 95 theses, or statements, criticizing the Church and nailed them to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. This act, which might seem trivial today, was a declaration of war against the most powerful institution in Europe. Luther's theses spread like wildfire. Thanks to the recent invention of the printing press, his ideas could be printed and distributed quickly and widely. People all over Germany, and soon all of Europe, were reading and discussing his words. They were shocked, inspired, and, for many, furious. The Church, which had always maintained its authority by keeping the masses in the dark, suddenly found itself facing a challenge it had never anticipated. One of the key issues Luther addressed was the Church's practice of selling indulgences. Indulgences were essentially pardons that people could buy to reduce their time in purgatory. This practice, which Luther saw as nothing more than a money-making scheme, was deeply unpopular among the common people. They felt cheated and manipulated. Luther's criticism of indulgences struck a chord with many, and his followers began to grow in number. But Luther's revolution wasn't just about religious reform. It was also about language and knowledge. In a time when Latin was the language of the Church and the educated elite, the vast majority of people could not understand the words being spoken or written. Latin was a tool of power, used to keep the masses in the dark. Luther believed that the Bible should be translated into the common language, so that everyone could read and understand it. This was a radical idea, and it was met with fierce resistance from the Church and the traditionalists who feared the loss of their power. Despite the risks, Luther proceeded to translate the New Testament into German. He worked tirelessly, often in hiding, to complete this monumental task. When his translation was finally published, it was a sensation. People who had never before been able to read the Bible for themselves now had access to its teachings. This was more than just a religious act. It was a political one. By giving the people the ability to read and interpret the Bible, Luther was empowering them to think for themselves and question the authority of the Church. The impact of Luther's actions was immediate and profound. In towns and cities across Germany, people began to gather in secret to read and discuss the Bible. This led to the formation of small communities of believers who shared Luther's ideas. These communities, which came to be known as Lutherans, were the beginning of a new kind of church, one that was more democratic and less hierarchical. However, the Church was not about to give up its power without a fight. Luther was excommunicated, and the Pope issued a bull, a formal declaration calling for his arrest and the destruction of his works. The Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, also demanded that Luther be brought to trial. But Luther had powerful supporters, including princes and noblemen, who saw the potential benefits of a reformed church. They protected him, allowing him to continue his work and spread his ideas. The conflict between Luther and the Church escalated, leading to a series of events that would come to be known as the Reformation. This period was marked by intense debates, political turmoil, and even violence. But through it all, Luther remained steadfast in his beliefs. He continued to write and preach, and his followers grew in number. By the end of his life, Luther had not only changed the face of Christianity, but had also laid the groundwork for the modern concept of individual freedom and the right to question authority. The Reformation had far-reaching consequences. It led to the creation of new Protestant churches, which challenged the authority of the Catholic Church and introduced new ways of thinking about religion and society. It also contributed to the rise of literacy and education, as more people learned to read and write in their own languages. This, in turn, fostered a spirit of inquiry and critical thinking that would eventually lead to the Enlightenment and the birth of modern democracy. Today, we often take for granted the freedom to read and think for ourselves, but this freedom was not always a given. It was won through the courage and determination of people like Martin Luther, who dared to challenge the status quo and fight for a world where knowledge and truth were accessible to all. Luther's story is a reminder of the power of ideas and the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when the odds are against you.